Alright, kind of a response video to Fred on the subject of the first ouch kind of stuff still. Talking about the origins of the sensual brain and what it means, consequences and such. Painting is of Loreleila, and yeah, I should do something about her subjects, but she's more about the psychology of living than the philosophy of our origins, kind of. Anyway, and that's just not where my brain is right now. So anyway, I painted her sort of, kind of. I mean, she's always kind of digitally affecting her videos, so it's hard to get a good still of her. And yeah, I just thought the Lotus thing sort of, she's sort of natural, but but hard, a little bit, little, not a real flower. You know what I'm saying? Elegant and sensual and all that stuff, but not frivolous, generally speaking. Except, some of her theories are, I think, kind of mumbo jumbo. But anyway, moving on. All right, Fred and the brain stuff. First, I'll do this little vegetarian bit, just because in Fred's long video, yeah, it's his driving video. He spent a lot of time talking about some lady in her book and blah blah blah, and I thought he was giving it way too much credit. It sounded kind of silly to me. Anybody could make this argument about how, I mean, if you don't eat bread for a year, you have a piece of bread, it's gonna, it's gonna fuck you up. Don't eat potato chips for a year, then have a potato chip. Don't eat salt for a year, then have something salty. Um, yeah, I mean, it'd be a pretty amazing experience. So all that was kind of bullshit. And then his end game theory, our argument is that basically, yeah, she's right that somehow being a vegetarian doesn't really solve any problems. Well, it does directly. I mean, Fred, you're just not getting it that to feed meat, takes tons and tons and tons and tons of corn and wheat and other grains that are fed to these bovine and pigs and whatnot. And so if everybody became vegetarian, you would have to farm less. That's a fact. You wouldn't farm more. You wouldn't have to farm more vegetables and more land and more all this stuff. You could farm a lot less. And a lot of farming doesn't require you to, you know, you know, take a bunch of knives and chew up everything in sight. So a lot of farming can be done without killing a whole bunch of animals. I mean, obviously some are going to die. Some are going to get ground up in the efficiency of the farm. But it's not a necessary evil. Look, nature by itself is horrific. Okay, I mean, it's just horrific. I mean, there was a scene, on the California coast of a bunch of sardines that got into a bay and they all suffocated. And you look at it and you're just stunned at all these little organisms that are dead, that suffocated. And that's just one tiny event in the history of life on Earth. Um, it's brutal out there. And so, yeah, compared to the brutality of nature, it's a little, skin off your finger kind of thing. But that's not an excuse, is it? If that's always going to be our excuse for the human race, we're always going to say, well, it's futile, it's futile. Um, that's just bullshit. I mean, it's, one less suffering creature is one less suffering creature, period. And being a vegetarian, you will contribute to less suffering. I think that's just undeniable fact. And because you will consume more efficiently, you will eat the sun more efficiently. It won't go through another animal, another sentient being in a very inefficient process to make him fat and then go to you. It'll go straight from the sun to basically you without any sentience caught up in the direct processing. So, yeah, bullshit on that argument. Anyway, alright, back to the real deal, which is this first ouch thing. Yeah, it'd be pretty cool if you write a paper on this stuff, because I don't ever get around to any of it. I'm still kind of struggling, trying to figure out exactly what came first. I mean, the two things have to sort of be synonymous with each other in a way. Feelings aren't of any value unless you have a reactive consciousness. They have to they only can exist in a consciousness, and the consciousness has to be able to do something with the information, either store it as a memory or process it directly and change behavior based on what it's feeling, it's sensing. So my first thing I guess would say is that the word pain is already troublesome because it doesn't really describe all the other contextual miseries that humans or consciousnesses are capable of experiencing. We don't really call them pain, but they're damn miserable. So I guess I'm sort of thinking I have to change the vocabulary and use the word misery instead of pain, because it's a broader, there's more in that word, and it might say more, both explicitly and implicitly, about what we're talking about. And so then caught up in this is the whole idea of the attraction repulsion thing, and whether it's a direct, like a stimulus that's just directly repulsive, or whether it has this whiplash effect and you get to think about it and you process it and you put in a memory, what was a failure and what was a success, because sometimes you don't know immediately. And that's all part of this circumstance of processing the environmental first reaction of the brain, which might be just a sensation, like this is cold, this is not a good place to be because I'm cold, that kind of obvious push the organism towards things that'll be more conducive to its comfort, which is designed to be in its best interest for surviving. I guess that would be the game, right? The end game. So anyway, I'm just thinking that if there was a consciousness created by the intersection of sense organs, so like say your capacity to taste and smell and see, let's just take those three to start with. Say if they mixed, sight and sound or sight and smell were intersected, you might argue that that could be a mechanism that might cause what we call consciousness, because now there's a battle for attention, a battle for whatever the reflex would be to that perception. We know our eyes don't see the world that we see consciously, that they change it, that they mess with it. And that could be part of what created this idea of consciousness, the very fact that you turn it upside down and right side up and now create a useful mirror of the world, our interacting space, or whatever you want to call it. We have this space defined by light that allows us to interact in a very routine and consistent manner, based on what that sense receives as information. And it just might be a complication of having that complex of a sense. This ability, once you can see light, that there's all this information that can be gleaned out of it, and that reflexes can start getting more and more complicated because they can see different things and react to different little signals that might be in the environment. And so then you start getting this neurology building up. And then it seems that maybe that capacity to perceive in a raw sense and react to certain things came first. And then it was found conducive to survival, to find for evolution to fall on, a mechanism that would taint these things with an impression, of attractiveness and repulsiveness, comfort and discomfort, and that there would be, that would be advantageous to be able to color what we were seeing in the environment with that perception of a desire or a fear. So maybe even the emotional responses were the first responses, that you would have this ambiguous sense of foreboding or fear, and that the brain found that by making that fear even more repulsive, even intensifying the feeling even harsher, and making the sensation even more negative, it could create a more immediate reaction, a more direct and forced reaction. So a lot of our reflexes, if we notice them, we don't feel them. You reflexively react to something, a spider or something's on you. You don't even feel anything initially. You're just reflexively reacting. And it's like that with a lot of injuries or different things where you don't really feel what happened until after you've already reacted to what happened. And so feeling isn't really a part of the functionality, and that it only comes in when you start doing this more elaborate processing, when the reflexes are getting more complicated and where you're starting to evaluate circumstances, what's in your best interest, what's worked in the past, and all those kind of value questions start making feelings even more important. So yeah, the first ouch sounds nice, but it might not be. It's definitely something that was the first. But it might have been something that was consequential. The whole thing probably happened rather rapidly, I would say, in evolution. Once it had the capacity to create a sensation, it probably developed sensations very quickly, because it would just have huge advantage being able to label things repulsive and attractive. And so that mechanism of learning would have developed really quickly, to the basic extent, not the elaborate learning that we do, because it's so abstract and it's unparalleled in any other organism, because that's sort of a different, taking it to a different level, doing the vocabulary language, we've really complicated the whole neurology. So it's much less connected to that direct environmental interaction. All right, where do we go? We talked a little bit about a different way to sense, and an alien thing, and I thought that was going a little too far. It didn't sound like something you would naturally evolve, even on an alien planet. That there would still be, that evolution would sort of parallel our evolution to some extent, and so yeah, we might be octopuses or something, but we're still going to interact the same way they do, in the sense that there's going to be things in the environment that are a threat. We're going to develop a neurology that's going to be able to deal with threats, and it's still going to be the consume or be consumed kind of thing, and it's always going to be to the advantage of the DNA molecule to be a consumer, not a consumee, and we're going to be kind of designed to play that game. And so I think even an alien species is going to have sense organs that are going to take advantage. So once they can see, they're going to get as much out of it as possible as they evolve. Depending on how, if they have a niche environment, like I say, once they have a niche and nothing competes with that niche, they own the niche, like a dragonfly or something. Then evolution stops. We see that in some organisms. Crocodiles, they really just don't improve because they've kind of got the basic game down. They don't have to do anything else to function, to survive. They're durable, and they have the toolkit needed to take advantage of most circumstances to win the game. Alright, so what else? Title-wise, I'm not too sure what Step Towards Ecology of Pain. I don't know. That doesn't really work for me. But whatever. There's lots of other ways to describe it, I suppose. I thought I had something written down, but apparently I don't. Well, whatever. Worry about that later. Okay, so how do I finish this up? Alright, well, in overview, getting to the psychology of it, it's again, I gotta point out that nature would take this to an extreme. It would take it to whatever is conducive to survival. So it doesn't really care about the welfare of the organism. It doesn't care how much misery it really imposes, as long as it doesn't impose enough to drive you off a cliff, just screaming. So as long as it keeps you functional, it keeps you in the game, it keeps you hungry and willing to fight for your subsistence through the pain, that's how much it'll give you. And in the end, we're not really designed to be satisfied. We're designed to be in a state of desire and want and interest, which is not a complacent state of being. So, in a sense, we're designed to be miserable. We're designed for that to be a big component of our existence, because then we will fight to get out of that condition of misery, and we will fight in how nature's designed it, how evolution imposes it, which is we will do what is conducive to our DNA surviving into the future. And so it's sort of it's a dismal system. It's a it's a stupid, idiotic design that a rational brain that had appreciation for this sensation of misery, that knew the difference, knew that it was qualitative, that repulsion and attraction, I mean, from evolution standards, it doesn't care what mechanism it chooses. Where an intelligence would say, always use the carrot if it'll accomplish the task, and never use the stick. Nature couldn't care less. It says, no, I'll use the stick because the stick works. And it doesn't have any ability to appreciate that there's any difference between a carrot and a stick. So it's just saying what gets the organism into the future. And so it doesn't care. Whipping works, it'll whip it. It'll brutalize it. It'll impose misery on it if that gets it into the future. Where an intelligence would say, no, you don't bother with this hard pain, misery, suffering thing. You just create the desirous, attractive forces, and you don't bother with those repulsive forces, the negative ones. So, yeah. So again, as usual, I will end with some sort of dismal statement cursing life itself as a failed, dismal, idiotic Frankenstein experiment that if we cannot improve substantially, we have no business perpetuating in animals or humans. And that sort of relates to the other argument about vegetarianism and ethics, and that the progress is inevitably going to come to these conclusions, in my opinion. I mean, we're inevitably going to realize we're just caught up in a psychology of desire, of ambition, of ego bullshit. And, once you eliminate that artificial chase that's created by a false and fake deprivation imposed by nature at your birth, essentially, there's no gain here. There's just cleaning up your own misery. There's just finding ways to satisfy your hunger, your deprivations, your inadequacies, your deficiencies, your emptinesses. We're filling gas tanks that should never have been built. I mean, don't make the gas tank, you don't have to pour gas in it, kind of argument. And so the whole thing is brutally, horribly awful. And yes, maybe being a vegetarian is an almost meaningless bit of nothing in terms of doing something about the misery encountered or experienced by sentient beings. But acknowledging the necessity of doing something, and that's basically what it is. It's an acknowledgement that here I am, what can I do as an individual? I can do that as an individual. I can't change other people's reproductive choices at this moment. I can't do a lot of other things that would be more productive in terms of reducing suffering. But I can certainly control how much I encourage the system to maintain instruments of misery. Alright, that's enough. Okay, so till the next time and such. And yeah, it's not a great painting. It was just, I gotta finish it. I just gave up where it was. It needs more something. And so I'll add more something at some other time. So this is probably too long, I bet. Let's see. It says 19, yeah. So this will have to go on the Doom Gloomy channel. All right. Anyway, till next time and such and so forth.